this small town's Halloween decorations started moving. The pumpkin on Mrs. Carter's porch rolled off the step and looked up. It wasn't a real look, but in the dark of Halloween night the carved grin seemed to turn towards Sam like a face waking. The pumpkin rolled across the sidewalk all by itself, small orange wheels bumping over cracks, and when it hit the curb a string of battery lights on the next house flickered and then marched down the fence as if someone were walking them. A plastic skeleton stood up from the yard, bones clacking like dry sticks, and turned its head slow as a wind-up toy. The scarecrow on the Miller farm pushed its arm through the post and stepped off the hay bale. All across Hollow Ridge, lights, puppets, and paper ghosts started moving. Sam pressed his back to the cold glass of his living room window and watched the whole street come alive. He could hear a distant laugh, not from any person, more like wind in a hollow metal bucket. Cars sat empty in driveways. People inside houses huddled in coats and whispered. Someone on Maple Avenue shouted, "What the?" and then fell silent. The moving decorations did not hurry. They crept like they could smell the town and were learning its shape. A plastic which floated down from a roof and landed in front of the town post office. The skeleton's jaw dropped and it pointed at Main Street. Rows of orange lights lay flat, forming arrows pointing toward the old church on the hill. The arrows pulsed, and every porch light in their path dimmed and then went out. For a second the whole town was a pocket of black, except for the moving things and the moon. Sam's heart hammered in his chest. He wanted to leave the window and hide under his blanket, but his feet would not move. Lily's voice, sharp and small in his memory, said not to run when strange things started. She had always been braver. If anyone could make sense of this, it would be her. Sam mouthed her name, but the night swallowed it. A wind chime made of tin cans began to play a slow, empty tune as it swung without wind. The tune matched the beat Sam felt in his ribs. The movable decorations all stopped at once and turned toward the Miller farm. Then the scarecrow lifted one finger and pointed at the ground. The soil under the scarecrow's boot opened like someone had taken out its breath. A small box squeaked up from the dirt and then slammed itself back under with a sound like a lock closing. The scarecrow laughed, a dry sound that fit its straw throat. Sam heard the church bell ring. Not the loud, proud ring that called people to Sunday, but a low, hollow chime that smelled of old wood. The bell rang 5 times, slow and uneven, and on the 5th ring every moving decoration looked toward Sam's house. The pumpkin on Mrs. Carter's porch rolled, stopped, and turned its carved eyes directly at the window where Sam stood. In that orange face, he thought he could see the reflection of himself, smaller and terrified. Then a knocking came at his front door. Not the kind you get from a neighbor who forgot their key. It was measured like a metronome. Sam's breath left him and he could not decide whether to run or open the door. The knocking kept time with the church bell, and with the tin can chime, and with the hollow laugh. When the knocking sounded again, Sam forced his feet to move. He crept down the hallway. The knocking stopped. He placed his hand on the doorknob. It was cold. Before Sam could turn it, the window behind him exploded into a spray of light and shadow as dozens of tiny taped ghosts slammed against the glass from the outside. The house filled with winged paper scraps. Among them, a small square of brown paper fell onto his shoulder. It was a matchbook from the Hollow Ridge diner with the word "Return" scrawled across it in thick black marker. Sam read it once, then twice, then dropped it on the floor where it lay like a coin. He wanted to scream. Instead he found himself whispering, "Lily?" He did not know whether she was okay. He did not know if anyone was okay. Outside, all the town's Halloween decorations had stopped moving. The silence pressed in, thick and loud. Then, from somewhere far away, a child began to cry. The cry was close enough to be real and far enough to be a warning. When the lights came back on, an image was painted into every window in town. A slow parade of Halloween things walking toward the church. Each porch light showed the same picture. Skeletons, pumpkins, witches, and paper ghosts, at the very same moment. Sam felt like the town was a tiny toy under someone's thumb. He had to know how this had started. He had to go find Lily. The story started with small things. 2 nights ago, someone reported that their yard gnome was missing. Mrs. Finch, who ran the bakery, posted a note at the counter complaining that her life-size cardboard vampire had vanished between Monday and Tuesday. She thought it was kids. Hollow Ridge had always been a quiet town where kids carved pumpkins and left candy on doorstep. No one in town feared their decorations. Then, on Thursday, a single jack-o'-lantern was found at the edge of the woods like a warning. It had not been carved by any hand alive. The mouth was too smooth, and when the sheriff took a photo the pumpkin's light winked out in the picture. People said, "Old things happen in the woods." They told each other ghost stories as if the stories were blankets, but that night the pumpkin rolled into the main road and stopped in front of the diner. No one knew why. The mayor, a man named Reeves, made a speech about safety and common sense. He suggested unplugging power to decorations and keeping doors locked. Sheriff Tom rode his cruiser down empty streets and spoke to porch cameras, but all the footage was fuzz. The cameras showed the decorations moving, and then nothing. Like someone had edited the town out of the film. Sam and Lily had walked past the Miller farm the week before, and made a joke about the giant Frankenstein figure with the flashing eyes. Lily said, "Imagine if it walked away. I'd follow it all the way to Mars." They both laughed. Sam had not laughed since the church bell rang. Hollow Ridge had a history that people pretended to forget. There were stories about a well on the other side of town where people said a woman had been buried long ago for speaking to the wrong things. Children dared each other to knock on the old church door at midnight and run. The older folks said those were only stories told to keep kids from wandering the woods. But every story keeps some truth. Mrs. Hargrove, who lived by the post office, had told Sam when he was small, the town remembers. It keeps what it thinks belongs to it. Sam had shrugged it off then. Now, he wondered what the town might be remembering. In the calm after the first shock, people went back to their kitchens and their phones. They measured the damage. A toppled skeleton here, a string of lights missing there. They whispered, called loved ones, and checked doors. The TV showed a reporter standing under a street lamp, voice tight, saying experts were baffled. The experts suggested nothing more than pranksters and loose wires. Sam wanted to believe that because pranks could be explained. But when he walked past Mrs. Carter's house the pumpkin was back on the step. It had not been carved wrong. It had a fresh, neat smile, but overnight a small hole had been drilled into the base, and in the hole there was a tiny, carved tooth. When Sam reached for it, as if pulled by magnets, the pumpkin's grin split wider and a sound came from the hole, not a voice, not words, just a slow scraping like the earth moving under a heavy boot. That night, Sam decided to look for Lily. He gripped his jacket and stepped outside where the air smelled like wet paper and apples. Someone had left a trail of candy corn leading down to the town square, like breadcrumbs for a storybook hero. Sam followed. The trail ended at the fountain in the square. The fountain, which had been dry since summer, was full and bubbling, though no one had turned it on. In the water, the reflections were wrong. They showed not the moon, but huge, dark shapes far below. Sam leaned closer, and the water shivered like a held breath. When he took a step back, the fountain's surface broke, and up from it floated a paper ghost no larger than his palm. It hung in the air, then pointed with a tiny, crumpled hand toward the old church. Sam felt something cold touch the back of his neck. He spun. Behind him, the line of decorations that had been walking earlier had formed a circle. At the center of that circle stood a new figure he had never seen before, a tall, ragged silhouette made of torn black cloth and Christmas lights, with a pumpkin for a head. The pumpkin's carved eyes were empty and deep. Then, slow as a falling leaf, it lifted one arm and pointed at Sam. The church bell in the distance rang once, and the town's night inhaled. There came a sound from the direction of Sam's house, a heavy, deliberate knock that matched the bell and the paper ghost's slow finger. Sam's feet felt like they belonged to someone else. He turned to run, but the ring of decorations tightened like a hand closing. The ragged figure let out that dry laugh, and in the laugh Sam heard his own name whispered. He turned and saw, through the circle of moving things, a shape at the church door, 2 shoulders and the same matchbook from the diner clutched in its hand. Sam realized, with a sudden, terrible clarity, that the matchbook did not belong to anyone living. He heard his own voice from somewhere very near say, "Lily?" And then the world dropped out of the sky like a curtain. A dozen small lights winked on at once around the square, and every moving decoration faced the church. The ragged figure stepped forward and began to walk. Sam took 1 step back. The ground beneath his boot felt soft, as if someone had just poured soil there. He wanted to run, to wake up, to go back to being 9 years old and safe. But the ragged figure kept coming. The matchbook in the figure's hand opened, and in black ink, a single word appeared on the first page, like a name burned into paper: return. The ragged figure laughed again, and from the laugh a voice spoke Sam's name. At the same moment, someone, or something, began to pound on Sam's own front door.